Hello and welcome back to CWU Live. Today's episode is on some big changes in the post office, and specifically an update earlier this week from the post office and the government on 108 Crown post offices which will be offloaded, so potentially closing. They're going to be franchised out. Now, precisely what this all means and the impact this could have on jobs is something I'll be discussing with Andy Furey, Assistant Secretary with responsibility for post office workers. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Hi everyone.
As ever, I will be asking Andy questions put to him by you. You're the most important people on this stream, the members. So if you do have any questions for Andy, please do put them in the chat and I will put them to him as we go through the show. I'm going to start the show with the announcement made by the post office this week. So this is a press release they put out on Tuesday. So the post office has today, 8th of April, announced that following a board decision, it is moving to a fully franchised network as part of its commitment to deliver a new deal for postmasters, subject to government funding. The last 108 directly managed branches which are operated by the post office will be franchised by the autumn. This means that those communities that currently have a directly managed branch in their area will continue to be able to access post office services either at or near to the same location. The press release from the post office says that moving to a franchising model is necessary, as currently the Crown post offices are losing £40 million annually. That's what they say. They say that closing them will allow them to improve the deal for postmasters. Again, this is the post office's position. We can read a statement from Nigel Railton, who is the chair of the post office. So he says, moving to a fully franchised network is one part of enabling the post office to deliver a new deal for postmasters, helping to create a long-term sustainable future for the post office. By franchising these branches, we are protecting access to our services for communities right across the UK and realising £40 million worth of saving that will enable us to uplift postmasters' remuneration by up to 10%. Over the coming months, we will continue to work with our unions to ensure that we treat our staff working in these 108 branches with care and respect through this transition, consulting with them on proposed changes. The 108 post offices will either stay in the same location where possible or be located close to the existing location, meaning customers will continue to have access to a full suite of products and services. That was Nigel Railton, I suppose, trying to reassure their consumers, saying you'll still have a post office, and trying to reassure workers as well, saying they've been in discussion with the unions. We'll hear from Andy in one moment. First, so let's go to the official statement from the CWU. This is from Dave Ward. So he said, the Horizon scandal and the damage it did to thousands of individuals and the reputation of the post office should have been a wake-up moment for the whole company. It should have delivered a complete shift in approach, ethos and engagement with frontline workers. The news today that the post office will push ahead with the closure of 108 Crown offices with a loss of 1,000 jobs shows they have learned absolutely nothing from the scandal. The post office's claim that these community services will be maintained by their failed franchising model is laughable to anyone who has seen their local post office services reduced to the back of a shop. The sell-off of WH Smith last week shows just how fragile and ill thought out this model is. This is the full privatisation of the post office via the back door. He also said the role of the government must also be examined. This is a continuation of the hands-off role played by the Tories. We call on Labour to immediately intervene and examine alternative options. Now more than ever, we need to seriously look at creating a joint venture between Royal Mail and the Post Office, two businesses that should never have been separated. This is a major test for this government ahead of introduction of the Employment Rights Bill. It is inevitable that the news today will lead to further scrutiny of our relationship with the Labour Party. Our members and branches will see this as a crucial moment ahead that will truly test the link between Labour and the trade unions who created the party. That's the official CWU position, implacably opposed to this. Andy, first of all, I want to get something clear, which is, I suppose, somewhat hard to get one's head around. Is this the announcement that 108 post offices are going to be closed, or that they're going to be franchised out? And what's sort of the difference between those two things? What's the connection between those two things? Can you sort of clarify exactly what has been announced here?
So the 108 Crowns will close as Crown offices, and the workers in those Crown offices will no longer be employed by the Post Office. And the Post Office will transfer the services via a franchise into a sub-post office like WH Smith's, The two names that have been mentioned in the press a lot have been Tesco's and Ryman's, and the workers providing post office services in those franchise models will be employees of that company rather than the post office. So it's a closure of the Crown Post Office being replaced by what we would consider is a grossly inferior, substandard service compared to the Crown Office.
Yeah, and so I suppose let's go at this from a couple of angles. So from the consumer perspective, my local post office is on Kingsland High Road in London. Will that still exist but be run by Tesco, or will that become a Tesco with a post office in it, or will that just be closed and my nearest Tesco or a nearby Tesco build a post office inside their store?
Yeah, so the Kingsland High Street Crown Office in Hackney, got good members there. They do a fantastic job. Technically, they are losing their jobs. The company is prepared to offer them a redundancy package, or they can transfer under what's called TUPE legislation. That's the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employment. And then if they did transfer, they'd go and work for whoever the new service provider was, the franchise partner, whether that's Tesco's or whether that's a small little independent firm, family firm. They would transfer their employment if they don't want to take voluntary redundancy. That's, as it stands, is the offer that the post office is making to our members, but they're losing their jobs.
And so just to clarify in my head, so as it stands at the moment, they're losing those jobs. All workers currently working for Crown Post Offices will be given the option of taking voluntary redundancy or transferring their terms and conditions to the new employer.
Transferring their employment.
Sorry.
And the issue of terms and conditions we would have to deal with via a negotiation with the receiving company. So this is very technical and complex, but the CWU, on behalf of our members, would get into negotiations with Tesco's, Ryman's, whoever, and ensure through what we describe as a measures letter that we list holistically the terms and conditions that would transfer at the point of transferring employment from the post office to the new company.
And so let's go again with the example of Kingston High Street. Arbitrarily, I'm just picking the one that sort of I know because that's the one I visit. So say they've got 10 people working for them currently. So those 10 people are going to get the option of voluntary redundancy or transferring their employment to whoever gets that franchise. What if only 2 of them take voluntary redundancy? Tesco wins that franchise, but Tesco says we only want 4 workers.
So at the point of transfer, they have to take everybody.
Right.
Whether they would maintain that service level is highly debatable.
Yeah, but then they'd have to offer their own compulsory redundancy package.
Yes, absolutely. So the franchise partners, to make this pay, bearing in mind the post office are claiming that the Crowns lose money, so the only way the franchise partners can make money from the new service provision is to have significantly less staff serving the public. So there's an inferior service to the public, potentially greater longer queues, less experience if people don't TUPE, less knowledge, less expertise. So if we added up the service of Kingston High Street members, let's say that come to 100 years, if none of them transferred because they took redundancy, overnight we'd lose 100 years worth of experience, service, commitment to the community, and then that would be replaced by new workers for the new company who won't have that skill, knowledge and expertise.
And what are you hearing from members? I mean, obviously this is going to be very worrying for many people to be told that, you know, your jobs are essentially ending. You might be able to transfer, well, you will be able to transfer to new employment if you want it. They can't guarantee how long term that will be, but I mean, this is a shock to members, presumably.
Truthfully, it's a mixed bag. There will be there's both ends of the spectrum. So there will be some members that will be over the moon that they've got the opportunity of getting redundancy. That will broadly be based upon age, length of service. You know, some people that might done 30 years service might be at a time in life where they want to take a redundancy, paid off their mortgage or don't have a rent, children left home, and it might suit them. The other side of that equation is that we've got reports that members are absolutely, utterly devastated by this news. join the post office for a career, want to have the opportunity to carry on earning a living, carrying on paying into the pension scheme, and the opportunity for career development and progression, and that's all been taken away from them. So, it's the post office are playing on the fact that there'd be a lot of people that would be happy with the voluntary redundancy. Broadly speaking, the feedback is our members in the main, those that would get the better terms, will take the redundancy rather than be choopy to another company. And many of our members would see working for Tesco's or Ryman as an anathema to them, and they simply wouldn't do it.
And why is that? Why, when you say people would really object to sort of, obviously people want to keep the jobs as they currently are, but what's the sort of concrete issue with sort of saying, oh, well, this has been franchised out to Ryman's, I'll do a similar job but for Ryman's?
I mean, look, everybody's circumstances are different, and some of it will depend on where you live and how the proximity to where you work to your home. But the feedback we have regularly is that people would not want to go and work for a small private firm that might run other post offices, or indeed a larger major retailer. Many of these retailers pay the absolute minimum wage. Yeah. There's the issue of will trade union recognition transfer with the members? Will they have the same protections, the same safeguards of employment? So it's the uncertainty of working for a firm that's not the post office. For all of post office's faults, and it's got many, we have got relatively good standards and terms and conditions. We'd always want more pay, clearly, but the reality is that all of our terms and conditions are negotiated. We've got collective agreements, they're contractual, etc. So, it's going into the unknown.
Okay, well, this is actually a good time to clarify something as well. So, 2P, TUPE, that's sort of the transfer of employment from one company to another. What transfers with the worker if they do decide to do that? Because you've said sort of these are companies that pay the minimum wage or companies that don't have as good terms and conditions as the post office do. But if you're transferred into that company from the post office, do you also transfer the terms and conditions from the post office? How does it work?
So broadly speaking, the TUPE legislation is designed to protect pay terms and conditions at the point of transfer. And this is the critical thing, is that whilst it guarantees at the point of transfer, there's no guarantee of the longevity of that protection of terms and conditions. So in theory, and we would have to hold the new companies to account, pay, annual leave entitlements, sick pay arrangements, overtime, any bonus payments if there was bonus payments, those sorts of issues would transfer. So anything that would be broadly under the heading of pay terms and conditions that were contractual. The one area that's not guaranteed is pensions. So pensions, our members are in a Scottish Widows pension scheme. If our members pay 8% into the scheme, the post office pays 12% in. So many of our members have 20% of their pay going into the scheme. There's no guarantee that the new service provider will provide an equitable pension to what we currently get. The regulations or the broad rule of thumb on pensions is the new provider should provide a comparable pension scheme, but that would have to be negotiated, and there may well be that a Tesco's or a Ryman's might want to offer the transferring employees their pension schemes that might be inferior to the post office ones.
All right, this is a good question. Penny Whistle, hey there, CSC in Oxford here, which I think means Common Services Centre.
Customer Services.
Customer Services Centre.
Customer Services Consultants.
Customer Services Consultant.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got that completely wrong.
Yeah.
Customer Services Consultant in Oxford here. If in theory we're offered a job in Tesco Post Office with the same wages and benefits, etc., would the 6-month redundancy money still be on the table? So if you're offered that job in the post office, you take it in Tesco Post Office, then you're offered.
If members take the TUPE option, they forfeit the redundancy monies. It's one or the other. So it's a good question. Was it Penny? Was it
Penny?
Yeah, Penny. It's a really good question. So the choice here is if you transfer, you simply your employment moves from day one from the post office to the new company. you don't get a redundancy settlement or a compromise settlement with compensation. You only get the compensation, the redundancy terms, if you don't TUPE. It's one or the other. You can't. It'd be nice to be able to get the VR money, the 6 months VR money. Presumably, Penny's a relatively new serving employee, so it'd be nice to get the 6 months money and transfer with your terms and conditions. But unfortunately, that's not the case. It's one or the other.
So very helpful. The post office, feel free to put in a follow-up question as well, Penny Whistle, if there's sort of a different angle you want covered. This is a nationalised service. The post office is very much sort of in the hands of the government. Let's see how the government minister in charge of the post offices put this to Parliament earlier in the week.
Today, Post Office announced that it would be moving to a fully franchised network as part of those plans. This will realise significant savings, potentially £100 million over the duration of this Parliament. Many members wrote to me with their concerns about their local directly managed branches prior to this announcement. We have heard these concerns. The Post Office will therefore ensure that each directly managed branch will be franchised, either on-site or in a location nearby, so that service provision will remain in place in communities. Making these changes will ensure that the company is more sustainable. To support the provision of the Post Office in every community across the UK, the Government plans to provide up to £83 million of subsidy next year. This is up from the £50 million provided under the last Government and is in addition to the uplift that we provided in the last financial year.
So what was that subsidy he was talking about there? 83 million subsidy for the post offices, even though they're closing them down. What was?
So, I mean, this is really complex. The post office has been reliant and dependent upon government subsidy for many, many years. It's loss making. The post office is loss making, and governments of all political persuasions, the coalition, Labour, Tory, they've all had to provide government subsidy. Now, broadly speaking, they pay £50 million. The government pays £50 million a year for the loss-making rural sub-post offices who simply can't make any money. But there has to be a service provision in those communities. What Gareth Thomas, the minister, said there, they've increased that 50 million to 83 million to ensure that the 5,000 or 6,000 loss-making sub-post offices in the rural areas are looked after. Now, that money goes directly into the post office coffers, and the accusation is it doesn't find its way to sub-postmasters. Right. So whilst there's more government money being ploughed into the post office, it's yet to materialise in any significant way to those postmasters.
So let me put to you sort of the argument being made by the government, and sort of so I get your response, the CWU's response. So the argument put forward by the government is to say these Crown post offices are losing money. So they say they're losing £40 million a year, and they say that by franchising them out, the post office can save £40 million a year, and services will be maintained because they can guarantee that in each of these places, Tesco, Ryman's, whoever will take over the service. So what's your response to sort of Labour saying this is the logic, consumers should be reassured because they'll still have access to a post office or post office services? How do you respond to that?
I mean, look, the first thing I would say is it's shameful that a Labour government has actually sanctioned the privatisation of 108 Crown post offices. I mean, they should really hang their heads in shame. It's diabolical. The numbers are all very much smoke and mirrors. So the 40 million is actually what Nigel Roughton, the chairman, is suggesting. Gareth Thomas said something entirely different. He said that this would save, in the lifespan of this government, i.e. another 4 years, 100 million. Now, it's not going to, the earliest it's going to happen is by the autumn. So that means that they believe it would save £25 million per year. And that's what they've put in a letter to myself this week. So it's not 40 million, it's 25 million, But even that we're extremely sceptical. We've asked them to open up the books, there to be some to be transparency, and we're just not. Every time we meet with them, Dave Ward and I met the General Secretary, and I met with Nigel Rowton and Neil Brocklehurst, the CEO, and the numbers change every time we meet with them. It's a moving feast. It's like trying to nail blancmange to the ceiling. It simply doesn't work. So we're extremely sceptical about the numbers. We believe that they trot these figures out to justify their actions.
Yeah, and then sort of their argument that, because obviously they've got to make an argument to the workers, but most Labour voters aren't going to work in post offices. They're going to be people that use them. Their argument to consumers is to say, don't worry, you're still going to have a post office service near you.
Yeah, look, I mean, across the world, post offices operate with a combination of directly managed, what we call crowns, and privately run sub-post offices. Look, if you take America as the great privatization example, there is still the equivalent of Crown post offices run by the US Postal Service in America. Where this went wrong was with the coalition government artificially cutting away the post office from Royal Mail. It's severing the umbilical cord. It's the only country in the world where the mail's parcels outlets, Royal Mail as we call it, is separated from the post office, and that's done the post office no favours whatsoever. So in our statement on Tuesday, Dave Ward was calling for a reintegration of Royal Mail and the post office, because we need those outlets for Royal Mail services and products to be transacted, collected and such like. And there's a great opportunity here for the new owners of Royal Mail to come in and take over the post office, lock, stock and barrel, and provide a much better service to the community. So, look, this was political sabotage by doing away with the post office from Royal Mail, and essentially ensuring that it was going to be loss making because it wasn't part of a much bigger organisation. If you go anywhere else in the world, you'll find that Mails might subsidise the post office network side of it and vice versa. And there's some great examples of where post offices can be very, very successful, where they have a post bank. Italy is a case in point, Japan. And there's a lack of vision here. What there should be is a growth plan, there should be an investment plan, and we should be making post offices the focal point for banking services across the UK. The banks are retreating off the high streets. This is an ideal opportunity to actually reinvigorate the post offices and make them a point of destination for the public. Unfortunately, this government has walked away from that, and they've just gone for the easy option of closing Crown post offices and putting a poorer service via a franchise in its place.
We'll put some questions that have been sort of raised in Parliament in one moment. Just one more thing I want to put to you, which I think Gareth Thomas, who's the Minister, and Nigel Rowton, who's the chair of the Post Office, have put forward, which is to say, one reason we need to do this is so that we can compensate the sub-postmasters who everyone agrees have been given a terrible sort of deal recently, and many of them have had a great injustice done to them, and with the Horizon scandal. So in a way, they're sort of playing off the postmasters and the employees at the Crown post offices. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, look, first and foremost, the CWU fundamentally believes that postmasters should get a better deal. So, and indeed, we were the first people to be championed for that. I gave evidence in 2015 at the BES Select Committee, and I exposed to that BES Select Committee the paltry monies that postmasters are on, less than the national minimum wage per hour. So the CWU has been leading the way to call for postmasters to get a much better deal, and we're proud of that. But look, here's the reality. By closing Crown offices, that money is not going to find its way into postmasters' pay packets in any material form. They've had ample opportunities to do this in the past because, historically, back in the early 80s, we had 1,500 Crown post offices, and they've systematically closed them or franchised them, and none of the money they've saved from that has ended up with postmasters. And here's there's two issues you've raised. There's the despicable treatment of postmasters over the Horizon scandal, But then there's the appalling way they're treated in terms of what they're paid for the services provided. And the reality is network transformation, which the Minister actually referred to in his statement about having an independent inquiry about, network transformation, which was around 2015, took hundreds of pounds per annum, thousands of pounds per annum out of postmasters' pockets because they were forced onto new contracts. And the inquiry is actually looking as at whether the Post Office inappropriately missold and gave financial advice in a way that led postmasters to getting a worse deal. The Post Office is to blame for this. Ultimately, the failings of the Post Office, its financial crisis, the blame for that lies at the doors of successive management, Paula Venables, Nick Reed, who have grotesquely run this company, run it into the ground, and the only people that suffer are our members at the end of the day.
Let's go to some of those questions. This is Kim Johnson, who is Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside.
Kim Johnson.
I thank the Minister for his response to my question, but Everton in my Liverpool Riverside constituency is the most deprived in the country, and residents have received a double blow with the imminent closure of Lloyds Bank and the planned closure of the Crown Post Office, which is going to have a devastating impact on both residents and businesses alike. So will the Minister agree to meet with me to talk about and discuss these closures and to talk about the desperate need for a banking hub in this particular area?
I thank my honourable friend, and as every constituency MP will know, these are always difficult decisions for closures of banking services on our high street. That's why the government is committed to championing access through by rolling out banking hubs across the country. We are committed to delivering 350 of those. 220 have already been announced, and the closure of the post office that my honourable friend raises will trigger a further cash access assessment for her constituency, and I'll be pleased to arrange a meeting for her with the relevant minister to look at those options for her constituency.
That was Kim Johnson asking the question. Darren Jones, who's Chief Secretary to the Treasury, answering. So her question was specifically about how the closure of the post office, alongside the closure of a Lloyds outlet, will sort of limit the access to cash services that people in her deprived constituency have. Darren Jones' response saying, "Don't worry about it because we're going to be rolling out financial hubs." What do you know what financial hubs are?
Yes. So Dave Ward and I and the Postal Executive, obviously supported by Martin Walsh, our Deputy General Secretary, have been advocating that the 108 Crown offices should become rebadged as banking hubs. Our members have the expertise and the knowledge to deal with banking transactions. They deal with financial transactions all day long. The natural synergy is to create them as banking hubs, create support from the banks, from what is called the Banking Framework Agreement number 4. Banking Framework number 4 is due to be announced shortly by the Post Office and government, and our members should be able to provide that expertise to the public. So we support banking hubs, but they should be in post offices, not in standalone outlets, which they currently are. So the Liverpool MP was quite right in highlighting the concerns. So the way forward should be to make post offices banking hubs, and that's what we want. The ambition of 350, which was in the Labour Party manifesto, doesn't go far enough. There should be many, many hundreds more banking hubs across the UK, operated and run by the post office, and that's what we've been calling for. There needs to be a more ambitious agenda, and certainly banking hubs should be at the centre of that.
Can I just get you to clarify what a banking hub is?
So essentially, the banks pay into UK Cash Access UK, and they provide the outlet where people can go and do banking services, and then broadly speaking, one day a week somebody from Barclays will turn up to provide advice and guidance to Barclays customers. The next day it'd be somebody from Santander.
Yeah.
The following day it'd be HSBC.
But whoever you bank with, you can go there and pay into your account or take out money.
And the transactions are processed via the post office, and our members actually collect and deliver cash and generally collect cash from those banking hubs. So, there's a synergy.
That make loads of sense just to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Why aren't they doing it? That seems like a no-brainer to me.
The control of the banking hubs doesn't lie with the post office It doesn't lie with the government. It lies with a consortium of the banks under a shell, a company called Access to UK Cash.
And might some of them be trying to purchase the franchise to these closing Crown post offices?
We think that they want to rebrand and they want to move away from the post office. And our view is there should be government legislation to ensure that the banking hubs and the post office are integral and operate together. So there needs to be a vision for the future that provides a service as opposed to it being necessarily a commercial.
And maybe if the banking hubs are funded by Lloyds, Barclays, and the rest, NatWest, they don't like it being called the post office because they see the post office as a competing brand. They want it to be called something more.
Well, not just a competing brand. They got to pay the post office for doing it.
Right.
So at the moment, there's a commercial contract between the banks and the post office to provide those banking services via the hub. So the post office runs the banking hub, and then one day a week, Lloyds, as you say, Barclays turn up and provide advice and guidance.
And the banks want to break that link.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This does sound like something that Labour should be doing something about, right? Because obviously it'd be great if you could get your stamps at the same place you go to do your banking.
Yes, and look, Dave Ward and I, General Secretary Martin Walsh, we're meeting with Johnny Reynolds later on this month, just after Easter, and we're going to be saying to them that there needs to be more focus and attention on making banking hubs a real integral part of the post office, and a greater ambition than 350. I mean, if you look at the way the banks have retreated from the high street, 350 outlets, and that's an aspiration, doesn't go far enough. It doesn't in any way replace the banks that have been lost.
Let's go to another question in Parliament. This is Rebecca Long-Bailey, who is the Labour MP for Salford.
Madam Deputy Speaker, Salford Precinct's busy Crown Post Office is a vital lifeline for residents and businesses alike, especially those who collect their pensions and benefits in person. So put simply, closing it in favour of franchisement would cause local economic and social devastation, especially if services are reduced, staff are let go, and it would also put that service at the whim of the franchisee, which, as we know from the recent case of WH Smith, causes great uncertainty and insecurity. So what is the Minister doing to guarantee that Salford retains all of its existing post office services and staff in this geographical location? And what alternatives has he considered or will he consider in favour of shelving franchisement?
Well, I know that my right honourable friend has always been a great champion for Salford and has made it very clear to me, as indeed a number of other members of the House, how significant the post office is within her community. The vast majority of post office branches that are provided across the country are already franchised branches. And often in the context of both mains and local franchises are open longer than directly managed branches. She asked me what guarantees there are. As I've set out, we have made clear to the Post Office that we want every directly managed branch to ensure that there is a mains franchised operation in place in those communities going forward. I recognise that there will be concern while that change is taking place, but obviously if members of this House have particular concerns about particular aspects of that transition as it moves forward in their constituencies, I'm obviously very happy to meet with her or indeed with any other members to discuss those concerns going forward.
So Rebecca Long-Bailey there saying that her constituents in Salford will be worried if the post office closes because they use its services. I mean, he seemed to be saying, well, actually, it might be better for them because the franchised post offices are often sort of open later than the Crown post offices. How would you respond to him there?
The public really cherish their Crown post office services because of the expertise, the experience, the knowledge, and the number of workers that are providing that service. That said, sub-post offices equally provide a really great service, but they are sub-post offices. And here's the issue. I mean, it's quite laughable that Nigel Roughton talks about more sustainability. There's no sustainability if you hand it over to a private company that's not guaranteed to be there in the future. And we've seen that with WH Smiths. WH Smiths took over post offices. Many of those post offices are long gone now. They've closed because they've closed the WH Smiths outlet. So Rebecca Long-Bailey is right to challenge Gareth Thomas, right to highlight the fact that there's no sustainability when you hand it over to a franchise partner, because if that franchise partner goes bust or chooses to actually close the service because it can put other products and services in the space, why not? We saw a situation only 2 years ago in Scotland where a multiple firm of that ran post offices, 30 or 40 post offices, decided to withdraw all post office services and replace the space with coffee machines and hot serving machines for pasties and sausage rolls, etc. Their view was they could use that space and make more money by selling coffees and pastries to the public rather than what they were getting from the post office service. The communities in those areas lost their post offices overnight. They could still go and get a coffee and a pasty, but they can't get their post office services. So putting it into private hands, I mean, the reality is 100% of post offices run by private concerns gives no guarantee you're at the whim of the owner and the runner, the person, the company running those posts as to whether there's going to be a sustainable future or not.
Let's go to one more question. This is Dawn Butler, who specifically actually brought up the role of the CWU.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his statement today and all the work he's doing to redress the injustice that's happened over the Horizon scandal. As well as the National Federation of Postmasters, can the Minister also confirm that the Communications Workers Union has also been involved in decision-making? And as the Minister knows, I've lobbied him very hard on my post office in Cricklewood. We really want to and must maintain those services going forward. And I think a lot of the problems stemmed from the separation of the Royal Mail and the Post Office and that privatisation. So I just wondered whether the Minister would consider discussing the possibility of a joint venture again.
Well, I know from the conversations that I've had with my honourable friend just how much she and her constituents value the post office in Cricklewood. As I set out, our starting point is that a mains franchise that continues to provide the same services as the residents of Cricklewood currently enjoy will be provided going forward. So I hope they will not see any significant disruption going forward, but very happy to have a conversation with her. On her point about the Communications Workers Union, I have had many conversations since I came into this particular role with the leadership of the Communication Workers Union. As she will understand, they have been very direct in their view about the directly managed branches. In terms of them having a view and a say about the future of the post office, I've made clear we are determined to publish a green paper which will allow all those who are interested, including the CWU, to give us their view and vision of the future of the post office and the various questions about the post office's future.
So Dawn Butler there, I mean, raising the point that you said earlier, which is that Post Office and Royal Mail should be reintegrated into one sort of nationalised company. I mean, it doesn't look like that's on Labour's agenda. Are you still pushing for that?
Yeah, before I answer that question, Michael, I'd just like to pay tribute to the fact that our membership led a magnificent campaign to say Cricklewood Crown Office many years ago. The company wanted to franchise it then, talking about 20 years ago now, into a supermarket. And we opposed that. We got the local community on board, and the Post Office backed off of its plans. Ironically, that supermarket, it was due to go and close a few years later. Had the Post Office been put in there, the Post Office would have gone altogether. Thankfully, our campaign protected Cricklewood, protected the Post Office services for many years. So, I mean, that's an example of where franchising would have failed or has failed, and by protecting it in the public sector, retaining Crown status provides that service. The issue of the green paper that Gareth Thomas mentioned, and I would also confirm that Dave Ward, Martin Walsh and myself have met with Gareth Thomas on numerous occasions this year. The issue of the green paper, when we've put this to Gareth, he's put the cart before the horse. Why announce the franchising of 108 Crown post offices in advance of the green paper coming out? We understand the Green Paper is due to be published before the summer recess. The purpose of the Green Paper is to talk about the future of the Post Office overall, and is to invite feedback and ideas, consulting with the wider public. We would do a submission to that Green Paper. What should have happened is the Crown should have been protected until such time as that Green Paper was publicised, and then, based upon the feedback, a solution could have been worked up, taking into account the views of all the key stakeholders. So it's completely out of order what the government's done this week. They should have actually trod water, told Nigel Roughton and co at the Post Office to back off of franchising, and let's see what the outcome of the Green Paper is. In terms of what Dawn suggested about a joint venture, we will be seeking further discussions with the new owners of Royal Mail, the EP group, to see if there is an appetite to create a joint venture with the Post Office. It's not I don't think it's the will of I don't think government can make that happen on its own. It has to get the EP group on board. If the EP group can be convinced that there's merits in doing it, then we would be lobbying government to make that happen, because they own the Post Office. So it's a feasibility, a possibility this could happen, but it would actually have to take an accord between the new owners of Royal Mail, EP Group, Post Office and stroke government. But we would certainly be advocating a reconnecting, a rejoining via a joint venture. We think that has a potential to safeguard Post Office services for long into the future.
I'm going to go to some comments. So Cy London says Labour has a massive majority. This should not be happening. And Penny Whistle again says Oxford specifically will suffer too. The city centre has only us. It's a 20-minute walk for someone healthy to the nearest two, and they're tiny. The nearest big office is a bus ride away. Cash is king, says banks want to kill cash. Cy London, every digital transaction makes greedy bankers richer, always use cash. This is sort of provoking a couple of ideas in my head, which is that there is potentially a political opportunity here. I do a lot of political journalism. Sometimes I go on like right-wing media, and they're really obsessed with cash. Like on GB News, even Nigel Farage, for example, had a Save Cash campaign. They're also very interested in high streets. So it does seem like actually Labour could be vulnerable here if there were a campaign to sort of save cash, save the high street, don't close your post office. I could see that having legs, maybe.
Labour's made a mistake. Pains me to say that, being a Labour member, supporter for, since my teenage days. But Labour's made a fundamental mistake here. Instead of attacking 108 crowns and doing away with 1,000 jobs, they should be looking to invest and grow and building in the high street. And the reality is, ever since COVID, more and more people and the economic climate with the crisis of people's being able to, the cost of living, cash is so important to so many working class people. The way to budget is by actually using your cash rather than putting it on cards and all the rest of it. So yeah, I think all those comments that have been made there are very, very valid. And okay, if Farage is saying that cash is king, I wouldn't disagree with that concept. We've also got many members that are CWU members in the Post Office that collect and deliver cash and process cash. So our supply chain members in the Post Office do a fantastic job in providing cash to 11,500 post offices every week, or taking cash out if they have a surplus monies.
Could this be an opportunity to sort of make an alliance that might surprise the government? Because obviously the government seems, from how they tend to behave, they seem to get more concerned when they get criticised from the right or the Daily Mail or Reform voters than when they get criticised from the left. Could there be a sort of CWU Daily Mail campaign to save your post office, something like that? I
wouldn't have thought so. Bearing in mind the Daily Mail was very, very pro-privatisation of Royal Mail in the first place, we've seen those same right-wing newspapers, the Telegraph, decrying the buyout of Royal Mail from EP Group. So they're very, very fickle, and it's when it suits them they're quick to jump on the bandwagon. Look, we will lobby government. We will put pressure on government, and we will campaign politically. It's good to see those Labour MPs, Dawn and Rebecca and others, standing up and holding Gareth Thomas to account. We need more of that. And we will certainly be reaching out to Labour MPs to put pressure on the government to actually reverse this decision. It's wrong. What's happened here? 1,000 jobs are going, and they'll be replaced with significantly less jobs, lower paid at that.
Another question from Penny Whistle. Will the CWU be endorsing or supporting strikes or working to rule? And he says, I am definitely not in the mood to work for my area manager's bonus.
Look, the issue of, as our members in the post office know that I've led numerous disputes over the years, pay disputes and disputes to protect jobs. I don't think at this point in time there is an appetite for a dispute because we've got members that do want to take the VR package. If there was many members calling out for that, we would seriously consider that. To have a strike or a work to rule, you have to have a ballot, legal ballot. We've done that sort of thing in the past, action, short of strike action. But I certainly get where Penny's going. I mean, why would you, if you know your job's going, why would you be enthusiastic to sell products to the public if you know at the end of the day all it's going to do is put a bonus in the manager's pocket? I get exactly where she's coming from. So, I mean, look, the post office must know that the morale has plummeted through the floor as a consequence of this announcement, and therefore you're going to have a demotivated workforce that won't necessarily, perform as well as it could do. So, because of the fact that they're being discarded, their jobs are being thrown on the scrap heap, being thrown in the bin. They've been told they're no longer wanted. If you want to remain in employment, go and work for the new franchise partner or take some money and go. I mean, that's a very bitter pill to swallow, because these people, our members, have provided, fabulous service for many years to communities, and now they're told that you're overpaid, you're contributing to the loss making, and we don't need you or want you any longer.
I will wrap up in a moment. Any final thoughts before we do?
One last thing is, just a bit left field, but today we had a pay ballot close. I know it won't be at the forefront of every member's mind, because obviously job security and their future is important. But the members have voted 93% for a pay agreement. It's a 3% deal. I'd like to thank the members who have voted in that deal. It will make a difference for the members that retaining jobs in supply chain and administration central functions, and it will make a difference to people's redundancy payments as well. So I'm pleased that we were able to sort the pay agreement out before this announcement was made. I shudder to think what it would have been like trying to secure a pay agreement on the back of them announcing that 108 crowns were going, with the loss of 1,000 jobs. So we're pleased we resolved that, and thank our members for voting for that deal, whilst recognising that pay is important. But of course, having a job, having a guaranteed earnings month in, month out, having stability and continuity of employment is vitally important. What I pledge to do for the members is ensuring that when we get into TUPE negotiations, that we ensure that we protect their pay terms and conditions, get comparable pension arrangements, and if we can improve the redundancy terms, we would do that as well. But also, we are going to keep the pressure on the government to try and get this decision reversed or get something better out of this decision. We're not giving up hope. The struggle continues, and we will do our best. As I say, Dave Ward, Martin Walsh and myself are meeting with Johnny Reynolds, the Cabinet Minister, Gareth Thomas's boss to all intents and purposes, after Easter, and we will be pushing hard to point out that the Labour government's got this woefully wrong.
Andy Furey, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. Thank you guys for all of your comments. We'll be back next week for another episode of CWU Live. For now, stick with your union, and good night.